Good evening, everyone. Today, I want to challenge a deeply embedded idea in modern society that we must trade our time and energy for money, and that this cycle, wake, work, repeat, is the only way to succeed. But what if I told you there's a different path, one rooted not just in financial literacy, but in neuroscience, physiology, and behavioral design? The truth is, when you work solely for money, you're renting out your most valuable resource, your time. But when you make money work for you, you create systems, habits, and states of mind that allow money to flow in without the constant extraction of your time or health. Let's explore 4 key principles grounded in both psychology and physiology that can help you reverse this dynamic. Absolutely. Here's an extended version of the point: train your dopamine system to delay gratification, in the style of Andrew Huberman, using neuroscience-based language and practical guidance while keeping it accessible and engaging. In modern life, dopamine is often misunderstood. It's been reduced to a buzzword, something people equate with pleasure, addiction, or short-term gratification. But dopamine is far more fundamental than that. It's the neurochemical that drives motivation, focus, and future-oriented behavior. Understanding how it works, and more importantly, how to regulate it, is one of the most powerful steps you can take if you want to shift from working for money to having money work for you. Dopamine is not about the reward itself, it's about the anticipation of reward. It's what moves us toward a goal, and it's the neurochemical signal that tells the brain, this path is worth pursuing. The problem arises when we repeatedly seek fast, predictable hits of dopamine. Things like checking our phone notifications, online shopping, frequent junk food intake, or even obsessively tracking small monetary wins like daily profits. When we live in this reactive mode, the brain gets wired to pursue only what's immediately available. It becomes addicted to now, and that is fundamentally at odds with building long-term wealth, which requires planning, patience, and delayed gratification. When you condition your dopamine system to respond only to short-term wins, you sabotage your ability to pursue complex goals. You might find it harder to focus on a long-term business strategy, resist unnecessary purchases, or stay consistent with a savings or investment plan. That's not a failure of willpower, it's neurobiology. You've trained your system to prioritize fast over valuable, but the opposite is also true, and this is where it gets empowering. Just as we can dysregulate dopamine, we can train and rewire our system to appreciate and prefer long-term outcomes. And when you do that, you actually begin to find satisfaction not in the end result, but in the process itself, the daily habits that lead to financial freedom. The key here lies in a concept called dopaminergic tone, your baseline level of dopamine. Every time you chase an easy reward, like checking your bank account compulsively or making an impulsive trade or purchase, you spike dopamine briefly. But what follows is a dip, and that dip lowers your baseline. Over time, this creates a cycle of craving, dissatisfaction, and restlessness. You want more and more to feel less and less satisfied. To reverse this, you have to intentionally build habits that support delayed gratification. One practical method is to set goals that are process-based, not outcome-based. For example, instead of obsessing over how much money you've made in a week, track how many minutes you spent doing deep financial learning, writing a business plan, or reviewing your investment portfolio with strategic intent. This shifts your dopamine release to the journey rather than the outcome, and over time, your brain starts to enjoy the process of building wealth, even if the financial payoff comes months or years later. You can also use what's called intermittent reward scheduling, a principle from behavioral psychology. The idea is that you don't reward yourself every time you complete a task. Instead, you randomly reward yourself after a few successful work sessions or milestones. This trains your brain to be more resilient, more exploratory, and less dependent on instant results. It's exactly how the most addictive apps are built, except now you're designing it in your favor. Another tactic is what I call dopamine fasting. but not in the overhyped Silicon Valley sense. It's simply about reducing unnecessary stimuli. Start by cutting out things that give you low effort, high dopamine hits, like checking your stock prices 10 times a day or watching every financial influencer reel that scrolls by. Instead, engage in low dopamine, high-value activities, reading deeply, brainstorming without distraction, walking in nature, or reflecting on your long-term vision. These quiet, focused states help reset your baseline and make meaningful work more engaging. There's also a physiological side to all this. Your dopamine system is connected to your circadian rhythm, your sleep, your light exposure, and even your gut health. Morning sunlight, regular sleep, and exercise all increase dopamine receptor sensitivity. That means your brain becomes more efficient at using dopamine, even at lower levels. This is a powerful tool because it allows you to stay motivated and focused without constantly needing external rewards. It's like upgrading your internal fuel efficiency. From a behavioral standpoint, one of the most effective long-term tools is tracking progress visually, not just financially. Use a journal, habit tracker, or visual dashboard to track your consistency, not your income. Your brain loves visual progress, and it can trigger small, sustainable dopamine releases that keep you motivated without burning out your reward system. Now, here's something important. When you delay gratification, you don't eliminate pleasure, you multiply it. The person who resists checking their business metrics daily and instead stays focused on strategy for a month gets a bigger dopamine hit when the results arrive, and their brain encodes that success with more weight. That's the neurochemical reward for patience, and it deepens your resilience. This is the same mechanism elite performers and successful entrepreneurs leverage. They build tolerance for boredom, discomfort, and delayed outcomes. They aren't immune to temptation, they've just trained their systems to prefer purpose over impulse. And because of that, they can work on goals that compound over years instead of chasing quick gains that disappear just as fast. So the takeaway is this: rewire your dopamine system to reward effort, not outcome. Praise yourself internally for showing up, not for getting a result. Enjoy the planning, the research, the quiet execution. If you can learn to find satisfaction in that space, the space before the reward, then you're no longer controlled by money or driven by fleeting dopamine spikes. You're in charge, and that's when money starts working for you. This is not abstract, this is biology. Your nervous system can be trained, and when you align it with long-term thinking, your habits, your focus, and your finances will follow. Would you like this adapted for a specific audience or platform, e.g., podcast, TD-style talk, social media post? Most people assume that thinking strategically is purely a matter of discipline or intelligence, but neuroscience tells a different story. The quality of your thinking is deeply shaped by your environment. The spaces you spend time in, the sensory input they provide, and the routines they reinforce either pull your brain into a reactive state or promote deep, long-range planning. If your environment is filled with distractions, noise, clutter, or urgency, your brain is more likely to operate from a survival-based state, one that's optimized for short-term problem solving, not big-picture strategy. The human brain is not wired to constantly multitask or manage incoming streams of stimuli. It evolved to focus on a small number of important goals with clarity and intensity. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, future modeling, and abstraction, functions best under conditions of calm, minimal distraction, and clear intentionality. Unfortunately, most modern environments are designed in direct opposition to that. Open, plan offices, constant notifications, overlapping Zoom calls, even crowded digital desktops. These all degrade the brain's ability to hold multiple levels of abstraction and make high-quality, future-facing decisions. What's more, every time you're interrupted or switch tasks, there's a cognitive cost. Research shows that it can take over 20 minutes to fully re-engage with a deep thinking task after a distraction. Multiply that by the number of alerts, messages, or background noise events in a day, and it's no wonder that many people feel busy but not productive, active but not strategic. You're burning mental fuel just to return to baseline. This isn't just inefficient, it trains your brain to live in a constant state of low-level urgency, what some neuroscientists refer to as attentional fragmentation. To build a life where money works for you, where you're thinking about systems, investments, relationships, and long-term positioning rather than just daily output, you need an environment that supports extended cognition. That means designing spaces, habits, and inputs that extend your ability to hold and process complex ideas over time. And that doesn't necessarily mean having a fancy office or total silence. It means being intentional about what your brain is exposed to and when. One of the most effective starting points is controlling your sensory environment. The brain is a sensory organ before it is a thinking machine. Light, sound, posture, and even temperature have measurable effects on brain function. Natural light, for example, helps regulate circadian rhythms and keeps alertness high without overstimulation. A quiet room with controlled acoustics allows your auditory system to downregulate and frees up bandwidth for internal thought processes. Even subtle things like the angle of your monitor, the type of chair you sit in, or the visual clutter in your field of view can alter how well your brain holds complex mental models. This is where routine becomes powerful. When you create a consistent time and space for strategic thinking, whether that's first thing in the morning, late at night, or mid-afternoon, you're teaching your brain to associate that environment with a specific cognitive task. Over time, this forms a kind of mental muscle memory. Just as walking into a gym primes your body for physical activity, stepping into your designated strategy space primes your brain for abstract, long-range thinking. This is supported by the neuroscience of context-dependent memory. The brain encodes information better when environmental cues are consistent. Another layer to this is mental bandwidth. If your environment constantly demands small decisions, what to wear, what to eat, where to sit, when to work, your prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded. Decision fatigue sets in. To reduce this, many high-performing individuals use environmental design to automate the trivial. This includes things like wearing the same type of outfit each day, keeping a simplified meal routine, or batching similar tasks into dedicated blocks. It may sound minor, but freeing your brain from these micro-decisions clears space for deeper, more strategic thinking. There's also a strong case for digital boundaries. Your phone, while useful, is designed to hijack your attention. Every app notification, every vibration, every color cue is a trigger for a dopamine spike. The more you allow this, the more you reinforce a neural pattern of shallow attention. So part of designing a strategic environment is redefining your relationship to technology. Keep your phone in another room during deep work. Use tools that block distracting websites, and perhaps most importantly, disconnect with intent. Go offline not just to escape distraction, but to engage in reflection, synthesis, and planning. These are the processes where strategy is born. Another underappreciated factor is the social environment. Who you talk to and what kinds of conversations you're having shape the cognitive models your brain prioritizes. If you're surrounded by people who only talk about immediate problems or surface-level topics, your brain naturally tunes itself to that frequency. But when you regularly engage with people who think in terms of systems, time horizons, and leverage points, your own thinking shifts in that direction. This is not abstract. Mirror neurons and social modeling mechanisms in the brain are constantly adapting to what they're exposed to. So if you want to think more strategically, spend time with people who do. You can also use mental anchoring tools within your space to guide thought. A whiteboard, for example, isn't just a writing surface, it's a thinking prosthetic. It allows your brain to offload memory tasks and see relationships between ideas in a spatial format. Visual mind maps, flowcharts, and even sketches on paper can enhance the brain's ability to synthesize data and identify patterns. In this way, the environment becomes not just a container, but a participant in your thinking process. Finally, we need to talk about stillness. In a world obsessed with speed and noise, stillness becomes a superpower. Strategic thinking requires space, not just on your calendar, but in your nervous system. If you're in a constant state of cognitive and emotional reactivity, your ability to simulate future outcomes, what neuroscientists call prospective cognition, is severely impaired. Tools like NANS, deep rest NSDR, meditation, or simply walking in silence have all been shown to restore executive function and improve insight. Sometimes your best ideas don't come from effort, but from space, letting the brain settle so that clarity can emerge. When you build environments that support this, places of minimal distraction, rich context, consistent cues, and intentional solitude, you stop living reactively. You begin to think in layers, in systems, in sequences. You start asking different questions. Not how do I make more money this month, but what system can I build now that will pay me for the next 10 years? That kind of thinking doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design, and when you shape your environment with that level of intentionality, you begin to tap into the brain's true power, not just to survive in the present, but to create in the future. Would you like this version adapted into a workshop, podcast script, or visual slide deck? Most people think of scarcity and abundance purely in terms of money, what you have, what you don't, what you're trying to get. But long before it's a mindset or a bank balance, scarcity and abundance are physiological states. They are conditions in your nervous system that shape how you perceive the world, what decisions you make, and how much energy you have available to act. This isn't metaphysics, it's neurobiology. The nervous system has two major modes, the sympathetic state, often called fight or flight, and the parasympathetic state, sometimes referred to as rest and digest. When you're living in sympathetic overdrive, which is common in states of chronic financial stress, anxiety, or urgency, your body produces a steady stream of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals are useful in short bursts. They help you act quickly in emergencies. But when they're constantly elevated, they begin to rewire your brain and body for defensive thinking. Your perception narrows, your thinking becomes short-term, and your behavior shifts toward risk aversion and scarcity. In this physiological state, the world feels hostile. Opportunities feel risky or out of reach. Even if something good happens, your brain is quick to discount it, focus on the next threat, or feel like it's not enough. This is scarcity physiology. It's not about whether your bank account is low. It's about whether your nervous system is locked into a pattern of reactivity and survival. And here's the critical insight. You cannot think, plan, or build effectively from that state. On the other hand, when you shift into parasympathetic dominance, when the body feels safe, rested, and alert, you access what we call abundance physiology. This is not some feel-good concept, it's a real, measurable condition where the brain has access to higher-order functions. Your prefrontal cortex comes online, allowing you to think strategically, simulate the future, and assess risks with more accuracy. You have better emotional regulation, your creativity goes up, you're more capable of seeing complex patterns, identifying leverage points, and staying consistent with long-term plans. This is the state in which you can actually build wealth, not just chase it. Because now, your system isn't reacting to every financial fluctuation. It's designing systems, creating value, thinking in terms of years, not hours. So how do you move from scarcity physiology to abundance physiology? The first step is to recognize that your internal state is trainable. Your nervous system is plastic. It can adapt, rewire, and stabilize in response to how you treat it. The inputs you give it, sleep, light, breath, nutrition, movement, and cognitive habits, directly affect which mode you're operating in. Start with sleep. Nothing throws the nervous system into scarcity mode faster than sleep deprivation. When you're underslept, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive and your prefrontal cortex becomes less effective at regulating it. That means you're more likely to overreact to stress, interpret neutral situations as threats, and catastrophize. A well-rested brain is a calm brain, and a calm brain is more capable of holding the emotional weight of long-term financial plans, setbacks, and delayed rewards. Light exposure matters too. Early morning sunlight triggers a cascade of hormonal signals that regulate cortisol, dopamine, and melatonin. Getting 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight within an hour of waking up helps align your circadian rhythm, lowers background anxiety, and supports clear thinking. This is especially important if you're trying to rebuild your mindset around money. You need the physiological foundation to think long-term, and that starts with light. Breathing is another underused tool. The way you breathe sends constant feedback to your nervous system about your environment. Shallow, fast breathing tells the brain that you're in danger. Long, slow exhales signal safety. One of the fastest ways to shift into abundance physiology is to take 1 or 2 minutes and do deliberate physiological sighs. A double inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This activates the parasympathetic system and creates a moment of stillness in the body. In that space, new options and ideas can emerge. Nutrition also plays a role. Blood sugar spikes and crashes create internal volatility. That volatility often mirrors emotional volatility. When your physiology is unstable, your behavior often is too. Eating whole, low-glycemic foods, staying hydrated, and avoiding excessive caffeine can keep your internal environment calm. That calmness is what allows you to resist impulsive financial decisions and maintain consistency with your long-term goals. But physiology isn't just about the body, it's also about attention. Where you place your attention affects your state. Constantly watching the news, tracking every market dip, comparing yourself to others on social media, all of these create a sense of threat. Your brain interprets this as, I'm behind, I'm unsafe, I'm not enough. That's scarcity. Instead, you can curate your attention, focus on your own inputs, measure consistency, not outcomes, track effort, not just earnings. This reframes your environment in a way that signals to your brain, I'm in control, I'm building. One of the most powerful shifts comes from redefining success. In scarcity physiology, success feels like a distant finish line, something you don't have yet and might never reach. In abundance physiology, success becomes the act of aligned behavior. If you're making smart decisions, living below your means, investing in assets, learning new skills, that is success, even if the external rewards haven't arrived yet. The brain responds positively to this kind of internal reward system. It releases dopamine in a way that sustains motivation rather than burns it out. This kind of internal reward system also builds resilience. When your nervous system is regulated, you can face financial stress or setbacks without going into panic. You can see failure as feedback, not identity. You can course correct without self-destruction. This is how you become anti-fragile, not by avoiding stress, but by staying rooted during it. Community matters too. The human nervous system co-regulates with others. If you're surrounded by people who are constantly anxious about money, who believe there's never enough, or who measure success purely through external comparison, it's going to affect you. But if you spend time with people who think in terms of systems, who are calm and strategic, who understand value creation and delayed reward, your nervous system begins to attune to that energy. That's not just emotional, it's neurobiological. The goal isn't to live in abundance all the time. That's not realistic. Life will activate your sympathetic system, but the more tools you have to return to calm, the more time you can spend in a physiological state that supports clarity, courage, and creativity. That's abundance. It's a state, not a number in your bank account. Once you understand that, you stop chasing money from a place of panic. You start building systems, investing in knowledge, and making moves that aren't driven by fear. And that's when everything changes. That's when your money starts working for you, not just because of what you earn, but because of who you've trained yourself to become. Would you like this section formatted as part of a workshop, digital course, or added to a larger talk? When most people hear the word compounding, they think of interest rates, stock market returns, or investment growth, and that's valid. Compounding is the mathematical principle that allows small gains to snowball over time, creating exponential outcomes from linear input. But what's far less talked about, and perhaps even more powerful, is that compounding doesn't just apply to money, it applies to behavior, to habits, to attention, and to identity. Once you grasp that, you can start applying the same long-term thinking used in finance to your own biology and psychology. Let's start by understanding how the brain changes. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is plastic, constantly adapting and rewiring based on the inputs it receives. Every time you repeat a behavior, you strengthen a neural circuit associated with that behavior. It's like carving a path through a forest. At first, the trail is rough and difficult, but walk it enough times and it becomes easier, smoother, automatic. This is how habits form. Not through motivation, but through consistency of input. This is the behavioral equivalent of compounding. One deep focus session today won't change your life. But if you train your brain to enter deep work every day at the same time, under the same conditions, you create a durable pathway for focus. The same goes for physical movement, meditation, learning a skill, or making good financial decisions. Each small repetition is like a deposit in your behavioral interest account. Over time, those deposits grow not linearly but exponentially, because the more often you do a thing, the easier it becomes to do it again. That ease is backed by biology. Every habit you repeat reinforces myelination, a process where neural pathways get insulated with a fatty layer called myelin. The more myelinated a circuit becomes, the faster and more efficiently your brain can use it. That means fewer resources are required to complete the same action. It becomes low friction. So when you build positive habits, you're not just building discipline, you're engineering your brain to prefer those behaviors. This is the compounding of identity through biology. There's a key insight here. What you do regularly is more powerful than what you do intensely. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year of consistent behavior. This is why people burn out on crash diets, get discouraged when their first investment doesn't yield quick returns, or abandon new habits when they don't see instant results. But if you zoom out, if you understand the curve of compounding, you realize that early effort often looks like nothing. Then suddenly it looks like everything, and this isn't just theory. Your nervous system responds to patterns. If you train it to expect variability, jumping from one productivity method to another, one business idea to another, one goal to another, it will learn to stay in survival mode, scanning for new inputs, unable to settle into deep work. But if you show up repeatedly to the same effort in the same way, you're telling your brain, this is safe. This is what we do now. That sense of predictability lowers cognitive load, increases focus, and triggers a more sustainable dopamine response, one tied to process, not outcome. There's also a powerful feedback loop between behavior and self-image. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, your brain registers that as evidence. I am someone who follows through. That internal evidence compounds. Over weeks and months, it shapes your perception of who you are, and once your brain accepts a new identity, such as I'm someone who invests consistently, or I'm someone who trains my body daily, the behavior becomes much easier to sustain. You no longer have to push yourself through resistance. The path has already been paved through repetition and belief. Now, the reverse is also true. Negative behaviors compound. Skipping workouts, avoiding financial literacy, procrastinating, doom, scrolling. All of these reinforce neural pathways just as effectively. In fact, the brain is often more efficient at learning from negative behaviors because they tend to trigger stronger emotional responses. This is why it's so important not just to pursue good habits, but to break the chain of bad ones quickly. The longer a behavior persists, the more entrenched it becomes, not just in your routines, but in your biology. This is where environment and systems play a critical role. Behavior compounds most efficiently in stable conditions. That doesn't mean your life has to be perfect. It means you have to create repeatable contexts for the behaviors you want to grow. Set up your space for success, remove friction, reduce decision fatigue. If you want to read more, leave your book on your desk. If you want to invest more, automate a percentage of your income. If you want to move your body, put your shoes by the door. These are tiny actions, but they act as compound cues, signals to your brain that reinforce the loop of behavior and identity. There's also a timing component. Compounding works best with early and consistent investment. Just as saving $100 a month in your 20s has far more impact than saving $500 a month in your 40s, small positive behaviors done early and often have far greater neurological and psychological payoff. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Don't wait until motivation hits. The compounding curve doesn't care if you're ready. It just rewards you for showing up. One of the most overlooked forms of compounding is attention. Where you place your attention regularly is where your life grows. If you constantly focus on what's not working, on threats, or on external validation, your brain wires itself for fear and inadequacy. But if you train your attention toward what you're building, how you're growing, and what you control, you create a different loop. One where gratitude, agency, and ambition coexist. Attention is the seed. Whatever you feed it to grows. This principle can also be applied to relationships and emotional health. Small acts of presence, appreciation, or support, done consistently, build emotional trust and stability over time. One conversation may not fix anything, but repeated engagement does. Just like with money, you don't need a windfall to build wealth. You need consistent deposits. The same is true in connection. People who invest daily in the emotional accounts of their relationships often find that they have deeper trust, better communication, and stronger support during difficult times. The real power in this mindset is that it frees you from chasing instant outcomes. You don't need to see results immediately to know you're making progress. You just need to know that consistency is always doing more than it looks like. Your brain may not give you a dopamine hit after day one, but after 100 days of compounding effort, you'll feel the shift in energy, in clarity, in confidence. At some point, the habits you've built become self-reinforcing. The new neural pathways are so well established that the old behaviors feel foreign. That's the tipping point. That's when behavior compounds into character. That's when the systems you built start carrying you forward. So think of your behavior like a long-term investment account. Make regular deposits. Be patient with the early stages. Avoid emotional withdrawals. Automate what you can. Surround yourself with people who are also playing the long game. And trust the process, because whether you're building wealth, focus, fitness, or inner peace, it all grows the same way, through compounding.